Hello, all, and welcome to Bennis Stories, a series of interviews with people who knew, loved, were influenced by, worked with, wrote with, were students and mentees of Warren Bennis. This is Kate Bennis, Warren's daughter. This series is created for the Warren Bennis Leadership Institute at the University of Cincinnati's Lindner College of Business. My partner in this endeavor is Betsy Myers. Betsy was a dear friend and colleague of Dad's, worked with him at the Center for Public Leadership at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government as its executive director. She has also been a senior advisor to both President Clinton and President Obama. Today, Betsy and I are delighted to welcome Raj Sisodia, who is, among other things, a dear friend of Betsy's, and was the Warren Bennis Leadership Experiences keynote speaker in April of 2024. As you'll see, Raj's clarity and gentle wisdom are so compelling that minds and hearts are changed just through the music of his words. Raj Sisodia is the FEMSA Distinguished University Professor of Conscious Enterprise and Chairman of the Conscious Enterprise Center at Tecnológico de Monterrey in Mexico. He is also co-founder and Chairman Emeritus of Conscious Capitalism Incorporated. Raj has a PhD in business from Columbia University. He has published 15 books, including the New York Times bestseller Conscious Capitalism, the Wall Street Journal bestseller Everybody Matters, Firms of Endearment, which was named a top business book in 2007 by Amazon, The Healing Organization, and Awaken. Raj has consulted with and taught at numerous companies, including AT&T, Verizon, LG, Whole Foods, Tesoro, Siemens, Sprint, Volvo, IBM, you get the point. A lot of places. Raj received an honorary doctorate from Johnson & Wales University in 2016 and the Business Luminary Award from Halcyon in 2021. He has served on the boards of Mastech and The Container Store. I have to apologize in advance that Raj's microphone was up and down, but it is worth turning up the volume to make sure that you hear every single word. Hello, Raj. Hello, Betsy. I'm so glad to see you guys.
Great to be with you, both of you.
So, Raj, we're so excited to spend time with you today. Thank you for your time. And I just want to take us back to, I want to say it was like 2011 or 12. I had just joined Bentley as the founding director of the Center for Women in Business, and you were on faculty and a prolific author already all those years ago. And I remember this table of various faculty books, and I hadn't met you yet. And I looked down and I saw this book, Firms of Endearment, with a foreword from Warren Bennis. And I immediately was so excited to see that, and also thought, oh my God, Firms of Endearment, this is a kindred spirit. So your work has taken this direction, and you've had so much weaving in and out of the Warren Bennis philosophy. So we'd just love to open up about how that all happened and your first interactions with Warren Bennis.
Sure. Well, that conference, if I remember, the theme was the rise of feminine values.
Yes.
Feminization of the culture. So we're starting to see, first of all, conscious companies, as we define them, had a lot more feminine energy in them, even if the CEO was a man. But they had caring and compassion and inclusiveness and nurturing and love and all of those things at their core, which are labeled as feminine values. And so I think that was the theme at which you also spoke. And, Firms of Endearment came out in 2007. And my co-authors, I didn't really know Warren personally, but my co-authors, Jack Sheth and David Wolf, both knew him. Jack Sheth was at the University of Southern California for many years, so he knew him from there. And of course, we all know of Warren. And so they approached him to write the foreword, which was a great gift to us. I think Warren was certainly completely aligned with the principles of what later we call conscious capitalism. Firms of Endearment uncovered those four pillars of what we later call conscious capitalism: the higher purpose to everything, especially in business, a stakeholder mindset where you look at the well-being of everybody whose lives you touch, conscious leadership, which is about service to the people and the purpose of the organization, and a caring culture, trust-based caring culture. So that's how we uncovered those four pillars. And I would say Warren, like many other wise humans, were unconscious conscious capitalists, because that term had not been used before that. But there are people who operate this way before the term was created, right? So we don't claim to have invented this way of being. We gave it a framework and some systematic way of looking at it. It was really an honor for us to have Warren bless that book and write that forward for us.
Because Kate, Warren didn't do a lot of forwards. He was choosy about who he wrote forwards for.
He absolutely was. And I think that it had to be something that he would be proud to have in his imprint and that he agreed with in terms of values.
Right. That he was aligned with.
Yeah. If you could have met Dad, were there questions you wish you could have asked him?
Well, having read his autobiography now, I would have asked him many of the questions that were answered in that book, about the formative experiences. Like, it is always fascinating how we come to do what we do and become the humans that we are in this life, and what shaped us, and all of the incidents and experiences, many of which may have been very difficult at the time. In my own life, I wrote about this in my book, Awaken. Some of the most traumatic and difficult things were also the most valuable gifts that I could have received. And so I'm always curious about that aspect of anybody's journey. What were the formative experiences and what were those crucible moments? As Bill George also writes about, when the dark night of the soul, when things really look bleak and difficult to navigate, those ultimately end up shaping us much more. We're not shaped by our successes. We are shaped by our challenges and by our failures. So I would have asked those kinds of questions. But as I said, he wrote about all of that so beautifully in that book.
The age-old question then is, why can some people have the same experiences but come out of it so differently? To what do you attribute that, especially in your own work? I'm thinking about Awaken specifically.
Yeah, that is a very, very significant question, because somebody was talking about resilience the other day, and she was saying that she is far more resilient than her sister, her sibling. And they had the same parents and grew up around the same time, close together in age. And yet somehow she had the ability to take those experiences and alchemize them into something value. And other people can be crushed by those experiences. So I don't know. I mean, honestly, the honest answer is, I don't know that what gives some of us the self-awareness, guidance, or the presence of teachers in our lives, who enable us to look at those things in a different way, some degree of self-awareness and introspection. There are other people who don't seem to have that, and I'm sure they're all capable of it. All of us are capable of it, but I think some of us are lucky in that sense. I think luck plays such a big role. The lottery of where you're born. You don't choose your parents, and you don't choose the time in which you're born, and the country in which you're born, and the religion and the circumstances. None of that. It's all given to you. It's all a gift in a way, right? So we are all of that is out of our control. As phrase that I've used recently is that we are given a life, but we must choose how to live, right? And what do we do with that now? The wherewithal and the perspective to be able to look at those things in a different way. I think I don't know. I look at my own father, brilliant man, probably the most intelligent person I've ever met. And I've met a lot of smart people, and such a driven man and so forth. And ultimately, a story in retrospect to me is a tragic one of unfulfilled potential and unrealized dreams. And because he didn't have that self-awareness, he didn't have that guidance, he didn't have the ability to process his traumas, let alone heal them. Those weren't available to him somehow. And I had the good fortune over the years of meeting mentors like Jack Shed, even you guys. Betsy has been a mentor to me as well. She's guided my life, and so many others, so many people. I think luck does play a role in that, or you might call it destiny. I'm not sure. We are meant to meet certain people and have certain experiences and process them. But I think the great thing about us as human beings is we can learn from each other's experiences. And we share, like, as I've done in my book, that hopefully, even if somebody did not have the benefit of that kind of direct guidance, that they can learn from my pain and my experiences. And I think that's true for all of us. That opportunity is available to all of us. But one of many things that makes human beings unique is our ability to learn from other people's experiences, not just our own. So I think that is something we can choose once we are aware. It's all about being awake and conscious. If we become awake and conscious, then we can start to look at the same set of circumstances and experiences and process them in a very different way than somebody else who might simply enter into sort of a victim mindset out of that.
Two things here that seem really important in leadership development is the crucible moments that we all have. And Warren Bennis, he talked a lot about that, crucible moments, but also the storytelling, the shared experience and the willingness to share that story. And then you also touched here on self-knowledge. One of the stories you tell about your father that really touched me was at his funeral, no one cried.
Yeah, that was, it's a tragic ending to a significant life. He touched a lot of lives, but he didn't touch as many hearts. And I think that is a lesson for us. The gift of that is what can we do to live a life so that at the end, there is a lot of grief, not just relief.
Yeah.
In my father's case, and my grandfather was even more extreme in that way. He was such a harsh patriarch, tyrannical in some ways, that there was a palpable sense of relief when he died. Literally, people were waiting for him to die. And how sad is that, right? When people are actually waiting for you to go. We can think about people in our own lives or even political leaders that we say, oh my God, I wish this person would just go now. That's tragic for a human being to be viewed in that way. I think that is really the litmus test of a life. What happens at the end of that life and how you feel as you leave. Are you filled with regrets and angst and bitterness? Or do you have some degree of satisfaction that, yeah, I was here and I was able to live the way I was intended to live. I was able to share. It was mine to share. As they say, many of us are born and we live and we die with our music still inside us. We never get an opportunity. But if you have the ability to do that and the opportunity to do that, then I think you have that sense of peace at the end, that inner peace. And then other people can look back at your life in a different way as well.
The program in Cincinnati is for nurturing and growing young leaders who become great leaders and important leaders. And I loved what you said about the being awake and conscious. We always ask, who were your mentors? Who were the people who influenced you? We're also very influenced by books. So your books are also out there for all the people who won't meet you in person. They're still doing good. How do we become awake and conscious people so that we are awake and conscious leaders?
That's, I think, the biggest challenge we have, global basis, is to elevate consciousness. And I see those two words are very similar. Right? To be conscious is to be in a way they're similar. How do we do that? I think it comes from guidance. It doesn't come from our education system. What we learn in K through 12, there's very little of consciousness. We simply don't address the most important aspects of what it means to be a human being. And so I think for that, it takes guidance. It takes teachers. For me, it took a nudge from my sister. This was around 2004 when she nudged me to take a course called The Art of Living, which was one of the spiritual teachers from India, Sri Ravi Shankar, had started, I think now about 35 years ago. But it's a very simple but profound course with 5 basic teachings in it at its core. And that for me was life-changing. Those 5 days, those 3-4 evenings and one Sunday, eye-opening. Suddenly, oh my God, I see life in a different way. I see the world in a different way. But had she not done that, and I was already like 47 years old, I had not had that experience in my past because I didn't have parents who had that kind of wisdom. I was born into a Hindu religion, but nobody in my family really understood the deeper aspects of that. They practiced many of the rituals and the restrictions that you're not supposed to eat beef and you're supposed to do this on this day and, whatever. And I never saw the logic in any of that. And nobody could explain to me why we were doing what we were. And so I didn't have any respect for it. And then I went to a series of Catholic schools because in India, in those days, many of the English language schools were run by missionaries. And so there I got a version of the Catholic faith, but the way it came across was not loving wisdom. It was really about, again, a lot of restrictions and ways to feel guilty and ashamed of so many things. And so I didn't have any of that spiritual education, and nobody ever exposed me to the wisdom underlying it until that course. And I took that course when I was writing Forms of Endearment, actually. And my sister introduced me to that. I was bored one day and she just handed me a book called The Guru of Love. And I read it. I said, oh, this guy sounds interesting. And then her son went on the computer and said, oh, there's a course happening in Woburn, which is next to where I live in Lexington. 2 days after you go back to Boston, can I sign you up? I said, sure. And so that was the beginning of that journey for me. Some of that new understanding and knowledge was in Forms of Endearment. I actually write about Sri Sri Ravi Shankar in there a little bit. And then the next stage of that for me was when I finished Forms of Endearment and I went to India for my 25th MBA reunion in Mumbai. And I went to see my mentor, my professor, who had recommended me for the PhD program. He was the one who had influenced me the most. And I gave him the book. It was still a pre-publication because the book was coming out in February. This was December, so I had the page proofs. And I said to him, Dr. Srikanth, this is my new book, and I'd really love to know what you think about this, because this one came from the heart as well as the head. Everything else I've done has only been from the head. The next day I went to see him again, and he said, Raj, I normally go to bed at 8 because I get up at 4 to meditate. But last night I was up till 11 reading your book. And I'm really enjoying it. And I said, oh, wow, that means a lot to me coming from you. And he said, yes, but as I read it, I realized there's nothing new in this book. I said, oh my God, what do you mean? This is so different from everything I was taught in business school. To me, this was very new. He said, everything you're writing here was written 4,000 years ago. I said, where? What management book was published 4,000 years ago? He said, it's all in the Gita, the Bhagavad Gita, which is one of the sacred texts in Hinduism. He said, it's all in the Gita. This wisdom that we think we're discovering for the first time has been deeply thought about and written about by the sages of thousands of years ago. And it was such a wake-up call for me because I said, no, I've heard of the Gita, but nobody ever told me to read the Gita. I just figured it's one of those mumbo-jumbo, spiritual things, which is not for me. And so that began the next stage of my self-education, starting to read the Gita and then the Vedanta, which really literally means the end of knowledge. It's the distillation of the purest wisdom. And I started to develop this new respect for this tradition that I come from, that this is an ancient civilization where people have thought about these things in a very deep way. And in a way, you could call conscious capitalism karma capitalism. All those principles come directly from there. Many of them are very much rooted in that. So I think better late than never. I was almost 50, as I said, 47 by the time all this started to happen. And then a few years later, a friend of mine, she went to a dentist, and in the waiting room, they had a book, Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. And she read the book, and then she said, oh, you must read this book. And so then I was already 50. And I read Man's Search for Meaning, and that was another massive aha. So again, the wisdom of millennia is sitting there waiting for us to discover it and just take somebody to guide us towards it. I think that's a big part of what we need to do today. At a young age, people need to be exposed to the timeless wisdom that humanity has accumulated over millennia and make that part of your education. You need to teach what really matters, not just what's going to get you a job and all of that.
I love what you were just saying about we have to teach what matters. When my son I asked him last year after his first year of college, what are you going to do over the summer? Are you going to get a job or do an internship? And he said, Mom, I am not going to college because I want to build my resume. I'm going to college to be educated.
I guess what's really interesting when we think about the Warren Bennis Leadership Institute and thinking about how do we create this content or this curriculum that was taking all the wisdom of Warren Bennis and the people who worked with him and knew him and respected him. How do we teach that, Raj?
I think we are too focused on timely wisdom. We need to also be focused on timeless. If something was written 5,000 years ago and we're still referring to it, there is something of timeless value there.
Yes.
We cannot ignore that and we say only the latest Harvard Business Review has what I need to know. Right? We need to tap into both the timeless and the timely.
And how do you teach that?
I'm doing that. I have a course, again, inspired by Warren, because his course was called The Art and Adventure of Leadership at USC, co-taught with the president of the university. And so I decided to teach a course similar to that. the art and adventure of conscious leadership, and I'm teaching it with the provost, not the president, the provost of our university in Mexico. And it's for MBA students, and it is very much about their personal growth and development. It's about becoming a conscious human being. It's about understanding, discovering your purpose and your core values, right? What really matters to you, knowing who you are. I have a framework, a book that I'm writing right now called Healing Leaders. There are 7 steps in that, and we go through that in the course as well. It's know yourself. That's the self-awareness. Love yourself, which is something a lot of people don't have. Most people actually hate themselves for various reasons. Unless you love yourself, you cannot receive the love of another, nor can you really love others. Right? So you have to start with that self-acceptance, not and self-compassion, self-forgiveness, and also self-appreciation. Because you didn't make yourself, you are a gift to yourself. You received this, right? You didn't design this, you received it. It's the culmination of 4.5 billion years of evolution is what you received as a gift when you were born. And so having appreciation for that. So know yourself, love yourself, be yourself, right? How can you live your life, not somebody else's life? Choose your life, which is what I talked about earlier, not being a victim to all the things that happen. So even the most difficult people and the most difficult experiences, you say, I cannot go back and change them, but I choose them. I choose to have that father. I choose to be born into that culture. I choose to have those terrible, difficult experiences because I can learn something from them, right? As Ram Dass said, friend or foe alike, all are your teachers. Everybody is your teacher. There's something to be learned from everybody, especially the negative experiences. So when you choose your life, you step out of that victim mentality and into a creator role, and you can actually then have that all serve you rather than be negatively impacted by it. And then express yourself. What's your purpose? What's the hero's journey you're here to live? And then become whole. Integrate masculine, feminine within you, whether you're man or woman. And we go beyond that to also say integrate the elder and the child within you. We all have access to those 4 energies: elder energy, child energy, which is innocence, play, laughter, creativity, the father energy, and the mother energy. And each of us can cultivate all of those within us. So we talk about how do you become the wise fool of tough love? The wisdom of the elder, the foolishness and the joy and the innocence of the child. You've got the toughness of the strong father energy and the unconditional love of the mother. How can you cultivate that within yourself? All of us can. But most of us are operating with 1 or 2 of those 4 things, and maybe in an unhealthy way. Not all of those can also exist in a toxic way. You can have toxic feminine energy, toxic masculine energy, etc. And then the last is heal yourself, which is heal your body, but also more importantly, heal your wounds and traumas, which means recognizing what are your wounds and traumas. We all carry them, whether we acknowledge them or not. We're all living with PTSI, post-traumatic stress injury. We may not be diagnosed with PTSD, but we all have that, and most people never acknowledge that, let alone do anything to heal it. And unless you heal it, you will be reactive in life, right? You will do things not from a place of conscious choosing, but unconscious reacting. And so I incorporate all of that into the course, in addition to teaching about conscious leaders and what they did at different companies and so forth.
And how's it been received?
Oh, it's great. Yeah. It's been life-changing for many of the students. It gets extremely high, like 9.9 out of 10 kind of numbers. But more than that is the comments. It really shifts the trajectory of their lives. It makes them look at business, life, and family, and everything with a different lens. It's all about framing. How do you frame your life? How do you explain life to yourself? And when you start to look at things differently, then you choose differently, and you're going to have a very different kind of a life. So that's really the most rewarding part of this, is not only the immediate reactions at the end of the course, but then over time, as you start to see how that has impacted people, I think that is, and it can be done within 16 weeks. You can have a significant impact on 40, 50 people that way. So we're trying to scale these kinds of things now, do more things electronically and create versions of this that are accessible in different ways. But I think it very much can be done. We can help people awaken and elevate their consciousness through education. There's no doubt about it.
With Dad's work, one of the things that every single person has touched upon is self-knowledge. And he talks about self-knowledge as being vital for any leader. And you've built on that. You start with self-knowledge and then it grows to healing yourself, all of those different stages, self-love. And I think that's something we should consider, don't you, Betsy, in the course?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because we don't have the cookie cutter curriculum that you find in so many places, right? This is so different because and starting with self-knowledge and then everything that you're talking about, Raj, the willingness to really look at your life and take and choose your life, choose the life of which you've been given, and then expressing yourself. What's your purpose and your passion? It's coming at it from such a different place. I mean, I'm sure that's what you're finding with these MBA students. Have you looked at leadership? Because I think the key piece of the curriculum too is a leader of me, that I'm the leader of my life. I've got to start with me. You've got graduate students. What's the average age of your MBA students?
These are graduate students, so I would say it's probably a 32, 33.
So they've been out there in the
Yeah,
world.
many of them have families, children.
So when you think about the potential of putting young 22 and 23-year-olds out into the world with this different perspective of their lives and their purpose and their self-knowledge and their willingness to go forward with the skills to continue looking at this, because are we ever fully healed? We're always on the journey, right?
Yeah, we're not. Yeah, that's right. And I think for me, I've always said to my students and others, I discovered a lot of this around 50. Had I discovered this around 20, I think it would have been significant, right? Some of it I may not have been ready to hear, but at least the seeds would have been planted.
Right.
And what we're doing is planting seeds. There's a beautiful metaphor. We were driving to Las Vegas the other day, and you kind of go through a piece of Death Valley.
Yes.
Famous Death Valley. And I remember years ago at our first Conscious Capitalism conference in Austin in fall of 2008, we had Sir Ken Robinson was our MC. He was a wonderful TED speaker, and I think he had the #1 TED Talk at that time, an expert on education and creativity. And so he was our MC. So between speakers, he would say something and maybe put up a slide. And he's wonderful with his sense of humor and his wisdom. And one of those breaks, he put a slide of part of Death Valley, which was completely barren. Most of Death Valley, the reason it has that name is that there's no life. There's no plant life, there's no insect life, animal life, nothing, right? It's barren. And so he showed an image of that, and then he showed another image of the exact same spot, completely covered in wildflowers. Because one year there was unexpectedly some rain fell. Normally it doesn't rain at all in that part of Death Valley. And one year some rain fell, and suddenly these seeds that had been dormant for who knows how long, could be hundreds of years, right? Suddenly with the right conditions, they're sprouting. And so I think what we're out there is scattering some seeds, which will sprout when the time is right. Or the seeds may already exist and we're just sprinkling some water and they can sprout now. So I think that's what we can do. But this is a part of human nature. Human beings are meant to grow. Human beings are meant to expand continuously. There's no end to that. But most people on the planet live lives that are very constrained and very limited. They don't have that opportunity to really live into what it means to be a human being. And I think we can plant the seeds for that through the work that all of us are doing.
Conversation is reminding me the power of books, because when you talked about the most influential moments in your life, they were both books.
The Art of Living is the name.
The Art of Living was the course, but what was the book?
The book was the Bhagavad Gita, the Guru of Love. Yeah,
the Guru of Love. And then you have this other book that really influenced you. And
Man's Search for Meaning.
If you could recommend 3 great books, maybe including some of yours, what would they be? Do you think they should read the Bhagavad Gita?
I do think so. I think that was a book that has influenced not only people in India, but many people across the world. Who were the Walden Pond guy? Thoreau, Thoreau and Emerson and all of that. Yeah. They were big readers of the Gita. Even Leo Tolstoy in Russia was an avid follower of the Gita. And Gandhi. For Gandhi, this was his manual for living. So the Gita, I would say Man's Search for Meaning, definitely considered one of the 10 most important books ever written, according to the Library of Congress. When I discovered that book at 50, I bought 200 copies of it. And I gave it to everybody that I knew, all my students, friends, family, etc. I said, this is a life-changing book. And so I would definitely include that. Another one that I really love is Joseph Jaworski's book, Synchronicity. Joseph wrote the foreword to my book, Awaken. He's an incredible human being. His father was the prosecutor in the Watergate thing. It was Leon Jaworski. But anyway, Joseph Jaworski's book, Synchronicity, is also incredible because it's about this idea that what we look at as mere coincidences and accidents and random things are actually all part of plan or a part of something that needs to emerge into the world. That I met Betsy for a particular reason. And then years later, when I was writing the Healing Organization, she guided me towards certain experiences, and those ultimately were life changing for me, etc. There's so many things that happen. You sit next to somebody on an airplane, and suddenly that results in a life. You can say that's random, but Joseph Jaworski are using quantum physics as well, that there's an explicate universe, which is what we all see on the above the surface, but there's an implicate universe underneath the surface. And that there are certain collisions that are being caused to happen because of something that needs to emerge into the world. So we can all be instruments of that which seeks to emerge into the world by staying open to those, right? And recognizing those. Here's a door opening suddenly, right? That it's not random. I am being guided by unseen hands towards something, towards my life's purpose, towards what I'm meant to do here. And so I've got a half a dozen of those in my life that ultimately guided me ultimately towards where I'm supposed to be. And I think all of us have that. So that's another incredible book, Synchronicity, that I would put right up there on that list. Even the way I became a professor, I was finishing my MBA in Mumbai, and I already had a job offer that I had accepted with a consulting company. And it was our last semester, and we were kind of relaxed. And one day I come down for breakfast, still in my pajamas, in our graduate dorm in Mumbai. On a day we didn't have any classes, and a group of 7, 8 of my friends were dressed up and going somewhere. I said, "Where are you guys going? We don't have any classes today." They said, "We're going to the US Information Agency to get GMAT applications to apply for a PhD in business." I said, "Oh, I didn't know you can do a PhD in business. Give me 5 minutes, I'll come with you." Right? So I changed my clothes and I went with them, and I'm the only one from that group of 8 who ends up coming to the US to get a PhD in business, right? And that ultimately was part of my path because I had to immerse myself into the world of business so that eventually I could then be a part of the healing of that world.
What of your books would you include? I would imagine Conscious Capitalism would have to be included.
I think so. I think that is a basic primer. And the fact that it's written not only by an academic, but by a CEO and an entrepreneur, together, I think gives it more power because you get both sides of that, right? You get the sort of objective, analytical, academic, intellectual frame, but you also get the lived experience of a leader. I would say Firms of Endearment was fundamental to my growth and connecting to my purpose. In a way, my purpose found me through the writing of that book. I remember the day very clearly. I think it was June 11th of 2005. I was in the Poconos in Pennsylvania in a writing retreat with David Wolf, my co-author. And I was writing some of the stories of these companies that we had discovered through that research that were loved by everybody. And I was literally moved to tears. I was literally having tears of joy. Okay. And I said to David, "David, I've never experienced tears of joy connected to my work. I've often experienced disappointment and frustration and all the negative things, but to actually be moved to tears by something at your work is," I said, "my body is telling me something. I want to dedicate the rest of my life to this."
Mm.
And in that instant, I knew. I mean, it was literally like that. In 1 second, I didn't. And the next second, I said, "Oh, wow, this is the rest of my life. This is a story of business that I want to be part of. I want to understand this and then tell it." So I was, for the first time, and I say in retrospect that my 6 years of business education were all about the head and the wallet, but completely bypass the heart and the soul and even the gut in between. And those things are important. So that's what makes us human.
Mm.
And now suddenly my heart was connected to my work. And for me, that matters. I think it matters for all of us, but for some of us, maybe it matters even more. For me, that was so important. I didn't know that that's what I was missing. But when I found it, I said, aha, there it is. It was like what he talks about follow your heartbreak. Andrew Harvey, I think. Follow your heartbreak. What breaks your heart when you see something in the world? There's a clue to what needs healing in the world and in you. And then Joseph Campbell talks about follow your bliss. What gives you great joy? And so that heartbreak led me to that bliss. The reason I started Firms of Endearment was I was pained by what I could see as all of the negative consequences of business as usual, especially marketing, the way we do it. And I had written about that for 10 years, papers and books about that. But I didn't have the other side of that. And now on the other side of that, I discovered the bliss. Right? And so for that reason, I think that book became life-changing for me, but also for many others. My friend Amy Powell, who was living in Australia at the time, she said this book came out at a dark moment in her life. Her marriage had just ended. Her business had fallen apart. She was in complete crisis. And then she read this book. Then she knew what she had to do.
Mm.
It was her path forward. It really gave her hope for what she needed to do. And that has been repeated many times. So that book is important for me. I would say the healing organization is also very close to my heart because I cried once writing Firms of Endearment. I must have cried 6 times writing the healing organization because those stories were so moving. Going beyond conscious capitalism, it's actively seeking out suffering in the world. And there's so much suffering in the world.
Mm.
And today we have made material progress, certainly in the last 200 years, but there's so much psychological suffering, depression, anxiety, drug addiction, suicide, all these things. There's an epidemic. It's a pandemic of suffering, really, psychological suffering, and there's the planetary suffering. And those stories are so heartwarming that I remember saying, I was flying somewhere and I was literally sitting in the plane crying as I'm writing. The guy next to me looks at me like, what's wrong with this guy? You know, there's no crying in business class. If you want to cry, you go in the back. He didn't say that, but maybe that's what he was thinking.
But there's so many great examples in that book of leaders who are walking the talk, how other people have done it and the impact.
Yeah, and it's that cyclical thing. I use the double helix of the DNA. You heal yourself and you heal the organization. The more you heal yourself, the more you heal the company, and the more you heal the people connected to that company. You cannot have a healing organization without working on your own healing, which is why this book now, Healing Leaders, 7 Steps to Recovery of Self, because it starts with yourself. My partner Neha uses the framing of me, we, world. Heal me, serve we, impact the world.
Oh, I love that.
Right?
Yes.
It starts with healing me. You know?
Yes.
The more you want to do in the world, the deeper you have to lay the foundation of me. Right? The taller the building you're creating, the deeper the foundation has to be. And every time you're stuck up here, it means you have to go and work down here on yourself. Right? And there's something more that's come up for healing. It never ends. You're not fully healed. Another metaphor she uses is we need to become a self-cleaning oven. Right? Things happen. Periodically, you have to hit that self-clean cycle, right? And go back to a retreat, which is why I make time now. I realize I'm 66 now, and that I need to prioritize my own well-being and my own growth. And so I've said 10% of my year is going to be dedicated to that. So I go on a 3-week healing retreat in India every December, which is more physical. That's the Ayurvedic. But it has spiritual dimensions too. But I'm also going on a 1-week spiritual retreat while I'm in India this year. I'm actually going to India for 6 weeks. 4 out of those are about healing. So I think it's setting aside 10% of my year and then 10% of every day, which is like 2.5 hours, devoted to yoga, meditation, exercise, all of those kinds of things. I'm doing this at this stage of life, but I think it would be wonderful if we do it at an earlier stage or start early. Why would we not put our well-being first? For most people, if you ask them what are their priorities, they might put their work and their family as number 1, number 2 in either order. And then they might put having fun in life, and then maybe your well-being or health is number 4. What if you made health and well-being number 1? It goes to number 1 when you become sick or become older, but what if you make it number 1 anyway? That's going to actually have a positive impact on your work and a positive impact on your family and a positive impact on your ability to have fun. So I think that's another element of awareness and consciousness, that working on that inner being. I'm going to a week-long retreat with an Indian spiritual teacher named Sadhguru. If you haven't heard about him, I would highly recommend another book actually called Inner Engineering by Sadhguru. He's probably the most well-known, well-respected spiritual teacher in the world today out of India, certainly. He literally has billions of views on YouTube and 17 million volunteers around the world as part of his organization. And so I'm spending a week with their inner engineering program. And it's called Insight. It's a program for 300 CEOs that I'll be part of in November in India. Right? So again, prioritizing all of these things, I think, is so important. It's that old adage of put on your oxygen mask before trying to help others. Most of us are starving for oxygen for ourselves, and we're not able to have the impact that we can and must have in the world.
Years ago, I interviewed Bill George, and he said that the keys to his leadership were daily meditation and his men's group.
Oh, yeah.
And I think about that a lot, that as a leader, he thought that was his job, was to keep his vision clear.
Yes, and be accountable as
Mhm.
a father, as a husband, as a leader. In fact, I'm now joining a men's group as well. I think that's also important. So I've started that process.
And well, friendship, right? And there's just this
Yeah.
epidemic of loneliness.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm dying to read The Healing Organization. I have not read that one because that's where we spend so much of our time is at work. And if we can create community and friendships and trust, be helpful.
Keep a box of tissues nearby.
Okay. Yeah.
So, Raj, do you think in the class that you're teaching with your MBAs are and part of the self-knowledge?
So I'm incorporating a curriculum within that course of my book, Shakti Leadership,
Yes.
which is about the integration of masculine and feminine. They also go through the hero's journey work. They go through the purpose work, understanding, discovering their own purpose. And then the healing leader, the 7 steps. This trauma thing is a big thing in the world. It's an epidemic of trauma, and very few people are doing anything about it. And we're all walking around in this traumatized state without even realizing it. And thence all the suffering. There's a quote I use that men are at war with each other because every man is at war with himself. Because we haven't healed within. And life is tough, and these things happen to each of us. I really love the book I recommend, The Myth of Normal by Gabor Mate. He's a wonderful teacher now on healing trauma, on dealing with addictions, all of those things. And his work is very profound.
And our culture is so set up against that we're supposed to be busy, busy, busy all the time. And especially women, I think, are very, very vulnerable to taking care of others before themselves. But
yeah, and we have a culture that, we spend $1.4 trillion a year on marketing in this country, and ads and coupons and junk mail and social media and all of that. And most of that is a very, very toxic message about what is life about and what makes people happy. It's pursuit of hedonic pleasure, not genuine happiness. My favorite author is John Updike, one of my favorite authors. He once said, America is a vast conspiracy to make you happy. Okay. Now, I think what he meant by that is really a conspiracy because it's not real happiness, it's hedonic pleasure. Right? Whatever you want, whatever your heart desires and your stomach desires, you can have it within 30 minutes. Right? People are chasing after something. You're trying to fill a void that no amount of food and no amount of pleasure and no amount of money can fill inside you. But that's the message we've been given. We said we thought when we have enough that we would be happy, and we have a lot and we're not happy. Why is that? Because, as Ramdas said, it's not about having more. It's about becoming more and becoming who we are meant to be and whole.
Yeah, and just that message alone, I mean, when does a young person in college hear that message?
Yeah, never. It's all about chasing the hedonic treadmill, right? More and more and more. And there never is enough. We see plenty of rich people who are miserable, right? It's not about that. And powerful people as well. It's not about that.
Because they think it is, and then they keep reaching the goal and it's never satisfying.
For people listening in, Raj was the keynote speaker for the Warren Bennis Leadership Experience in 2024 in April. This is a student-run organization and event. And what did you make of the University of Cincinnati students? Did you learn anything from them?
I did learn from them as well as from the other people you had assembled on the advisory council. Many of them I've stayed in touch with. I've had calls afterwards. And I'm going to try and meet some of them here in California as well. So yeah, it's a wonderful community of, on the one hand, the wise leaders who were connected to your father, and that whole day was a beautiful experience of them sharing reminiscences. And then these young people, they were wise beyond their years and so motivated and determined. And then the great leadership of that school, the dean and the other faculty that I met. So I think it's a wonderful thing that I'm happy to continue to be a part of that. So
Well,
please.
we're so lucky to have you.
Oh. And we met that wonderful young mayor of Cincinnati. How about
I
him?
know.
I know.
We need more leaders like that,
No kidding.
He's
Yeah.
definitely going somewhere.
I think that with this program, we will keep developing more leaders like that.
Yeah.
And like you, Raj, and like you, Betsy. That's what we're looking for.
Thank you, Kate.
We're
Right?
looking for people who are open. There's another thing you said, they really have to be open to experience. You can offer a lot, but unless you're open and saying, yes, that's what it sounds like you have done, Raj, is when things come towards you, you open your palm and let it in and say, yes, I'll take that class. I'll read this book. I'll have this experience. Can that be taught, do you think?
It's cultivating a beginner's mind, because it doesn't matter how much, what you don't know is vastly greater than anything that anybody on this planet knows by orders of magnitude. But having that humility to recognize I don't know what I don't know. And for many people with elite educations, they may feel, oh, I know everything I need to know. So I think that's something when they're ready, when the student is ready, the teachers are there, But I think, that's cultivating that is an important element. Becoming a lifelong learner and having a beginner's mind.
Can we take this incredible thinking and knowledge, Raj, that you're talking about and bring that into Cincinnati's leadership curriculum and really create a cutting edge, different kind of curriculum? And also I have this vision that can go out to executive programs too. Right.
It's one thing to do it in one place, which however great that is going to reach at a very tiny fraction of people who need to be reached. But sharing that and viewing other universities not as competitors, we're all fellow travelers on the journey towards wisdom and knowledge, and sharing that widely and making it easy for other people to adapt and use. I think that would be part of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. For people who are interested in conscious capitalism, they can go to consciouscapitalism.org. We have chapters across the country and in many other countries as well. We have events. We have our CEO Summit in October in Austin, which is a really peak experience for many people when they come there. So I encourage people to be connected to the movement if they are inspired to do so.
Thank you so much, Raj. Thank you so much, Beth.